Have you ever wondered what it felt like to live behind walls the outside world could never truly see? A place spoken of in whispers, imagined in stories, but rarely understood in its quiet reality. Picture a palace not defined by its grand halls, but by the hidden corridors behind them, where soft footsteps echo across marble floors, and the rhythm of daily life unfolds far from the gaze of history. Imagine warm air drifting through carved lattice windows, filtered sunlight tracing patterns across silk and stone, a world that is both enclosed and strangely vast within its own boundaries. What shaped life inside those walls? What routines filled the long, quiet hours? What truths were hidden beneath layers of myth and imagination? And why has this place, the Ottoman Harem, remained so deeply misunderstood? If this story helps you relax, maybe consider subscribing, but only if it feels right, and if you're still awake for a moment. Tell me where you're listening from. I read those comments like tiny stars on a map, each one marking another quiet traveller somewhere in the night. Take a slow breath in and let it fall away. Feel the stillness around you settle, the way silence gathers in spaces untouched by urgency. Make yourself comfortable wherever you are and let the edges of your day begin to soften. Now let's drift backward, not just through history, but into a world layered with memory, routine, and quiet human experience. A place that history often dramatized, but rarely allowed to simply exist. Let's step gently into life inside the Ottoman Harem. You find yourself standing not in the grand courtyards of empire, but just beyond them, where walls rise slightly higher and doors close a little more softly. The harem is not a single room, nor a hidden chamber, but an entire world nested within the palace itself, a space structured with purpose, rhythm, and quiet order. As you move further inward, the architecture begins to change in subtle ways. The vast openness of imperial halls gives way to enclosed courtyards, shaded walkways, and rooms arranged not for spectacle, but for living. The air feels warmer here, softer somehow, as if the stone itself has absorbed centuries of quiet conversation. Light filters through carved wooden screens, breaking into delicate patterns that shift slowly across the floors as the day passes. Nothing here is accidental. Every wall, every doorway, every turn in the corridor exists to guide movement, to shape how space is experienced. You begin to understand that this is not a hidden place in the way stories often describe. It is not secret because it is small or concealed, but because it is separate. It exists alongside the visible machinery of empire, yet remains distinct from it, like a second pulse beneath the first. Within these walls, life continues in parallel to the outside world, structured, organized, and deeply intentional. The scale of it slowly reveals itself. There are multiple courtyards, each with its own purpose. Some are quiet and private, where only a few individuals pass through in a day. Others are more active, where footsteps echo gently against stone and the soft murmur of voices blends into a constant low rhythm. Rooms branch outward in careful patterns, creating layers of access. Some spaces open to many, others restricted to only a few. It is a design built not only for comfort, but for control. A way of organizing both people and movement without the need for constant oversight. As you walk, you notice the presence of water. Small fountains sit at the center of courtyards, their gentle sound filling the silence without disturbing it. The water moves continuously, a quiet reminder of time passing. Steady, unhurried, almost unnoticed. It cools the air, softens the atmosphere, and creates a sense of calm that lingers in every corner. you begin to realize that sound here is carefully balanced. Nothing is loud, nothing abrupt. Even footsteps seem to adjust themselves, as if the space encourages stillness. This inner palace is also a place of routine. Behind every door, life unfolds in patterns that repeat day after day. There is a sense of continuity here, of cycles that have been maintained for generations. The same paths are walked, the same rooms occupied, the same rituals observed, and yet it does not feel stagnant. There is a quiet vitality beneath it all, a constant flow of small movements and interactions that keep the space alive. You may begin to notice how the outside world feels distant now. The noise of the city, the movement of soldiers, the negotiations of power. All of it fades into something abstract, almost imagined. Here, the focus is inward. The walls do not simply divide space, they redefine it. They create a world where attention is directed toward the immediate, the personal, the lived experience of each moment. And as you pause in one of the shaded courtyards, listening to the soft sound of water and the distant echo of footsteps, you start to understand something essential. This is not a place removed from history. It is a place where history quietly lived, unfolding not in grand declarations, but in the steady, unremarkable rhythm of daily life. For centuries, stories drifted outward from these walls, shaped more by imagination than reality. You begin to notice how much of what is said about the harem comes from distant observers, voices that never truly walked its corridors, leaving behind a mystery that lingers even now. As you sit with this thought, you start to sense how easily distance becomes distortion. The harem, inaccessible to most outsiders, became a canvas onto which foreign writers and travellers projected their own expectations. Without direct experience, they filled the silence with speculation, creating images of excess, indulgence, and constant intrigue. These stories spread far beyond the palace, shaping perceptions that would last for centuries. But here, inside this quiet space, those imagined scenes feel strangely out of place. There is no constant spectacle unfolding around you, no sense of dramatic tension hanging in the air. Instead, what you encounter is something far more grounded, a world shaped by routine, structure, and human presence. The difference between myth and reality becomes almost tangible, like stepping from a brightly lit stage into a dim, quiet room where life continues without performance. You begin to understand that the misunderstanding is not accidental. It grows from the simple fact that this world was never meant to be seen from the outside. Its privacy was deliberate, built into its architecture and maintained through strict social boundaries. What cannot be observed directly often becomes exaggerated in the imagination, and over time, those exaggerations harden into accepted truths. Even the word harem itself carries layers of meaning that have shifted over time. Derived from an Arabic root meaning forbidden or sacred, it originally referred not to indulgence, but to protected space, a domain set apart. As you reflect on this, the atmosphere around you begins to make more sense. The quiet, the structure, the careful control of access. All of it aligns with the idea of preservation rather than excess. You may notice how the stories told from afar often focus on what is sensational, what can capture attention quickly. But the reality here unfolds slowly, without urgency. It is made up of small moments, repeated actions, and subtle relationships that cannot easily be condensed into dramatic narratives. This makes it harder to describe, but also more real. There is also a tendency, you realize, to view the past through the lens of the present, to interpret unfamiliar systems using modern assumptions. In doing so, nuance is often lost. The harem becomes reduced to a single idea, rather than understood as a complex social and domestic institution within a specific historical context. And as those simplified ideas spread, they begin to replace the quieter, more accurate truths. As you continue to move through this space, the contrast becomes clearer. The stillness here feels deliberate, not imposed. The routines feel structured, not chaotic. The people who inhabit this world are not characters in a story, but individuals living within a system that shape their daily experiences in subtle and consistent ways. Think about that for a moment. How easily a place can be defined by those who have never truly known it. How narratives can form not from observation, but from absence. And how, over time, those narratives can become so familiar that they feel unquestionable. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the quiet reality of the space itself, those assumptions begin to dissolve. What remains is something more grounded, more human, and perhaps more difficult to simplify. A world not of spectacle, but of presence, unfolding slowly, just beyond the reach of the stories told about it. As you move deeper, the noise of the outside court fades. Here, sound behaves differently. Footsteps soften, voices lower, and time itself seems to stretch. It is not emptiness you feel, but a carefully maintained calm, where every movement carries quiet intention. The transition is gradual, almost imperceptible. At first, you may still carry with you the echoes of the outer palace, the distant sounds of movement, the subtle tension of political life. But step by step, those impressions begin to fade, replaced by something steadier, more contained. The air itself seems to absorb sound, as if the space is designed not only to hold people, but to soften their presence. You begin to notice how silence here is not absolute. It is layered, textured with small sounds that rise and fall without ever breaking the calm. The faint ripple of water in a nearby fountain, the soft brushing of fabric against stone, the distant murmur of voices that never quite reach clarity. These sounds do not interrupt the silence, they define it. There is a rhythm to movement here, one that does not need to be announced. People pass through corridors with a kind of quiet awareness, adjusting their pace to the space around them. There is no rush, no urgency pressing against the moment. Even when tasks are being carried out, they unfold with a sense of continuity rather than haste. You might begin to feel your own movements change in response. Your steps become more measured, your awareness more focused on the immediate environment. It is as though the space gently encourages you to align with its pace, to slow down without being told to do so. This is not enforced silence, it is cultivated. The architecture plays a subtle role in this. Thick walls and enclosed courtyards limit the way sound travels, preventing it from spreading too far. Narrow passageways create moments of transition, where one space gives way to another without abrupt change. Each turn in the corridor becomes a soft boundary, guiding both movement and perception. And with this quiet comes a different sense of time. Without the constant interruption of noise, moments begin to stretch. You may find it harder to measure how long you've been here, as the usual markers of time, loud events, sudden changes, are absent. Instead, time reveals itself through light, through the slow shifting of shadows, through the steady repetition of small actions. This environment also shapes interaction. Conversations, when they occur, are often quieter, more deliberate. Words are chosen carefully, not out of restriction, but because the space itself seems to encourage restraint. There is an understanding, unspoken but present, that sound carries weight here, that even the smallest noise can alter the atmosphere. And yet this silence is not isolating. It does not separate you from the world, but rather draws your attention inward. You become more aware of subtle details, the texture of stone beneath your hand, the faint movement of air, the quiet presence of others nearby. It is a form of attention that feels both calming and deeply focused. Think about that for a moment. How different a place can feel when sound is not allowed to dominate it. How silence, when carefully maintained, can become something active, something that shapes experience rather than simply existing in its absence. As you continue to move through these corridors, the silence settles around you more fully. It becomes familiar, almost comforting, and in that quiet you begin to sense the deeper rhythm of this world, a rhythm not driven by noise or urgency, but by the steady, continuous flow of life unfolding within these walls. The walls are not only physical, they are architectural expressions of privacy. Narrow passages, hidden doors, and layered courtyards create a world where visibility is controlled, where space itself protects the rhythms of those who live within it. As you move forward, you begin to notice how carefully each space is arranged. There is no single open view that reveals everything at once. Instead, the environment unfolds in segments, each area partially concealed from the next. You turn a corner and find a new courtyard. Step through a doorway and discover a room that was invisible just moments before. This gradual revelation creates a sense of depth, as though the space extends far beyond what can be immediately seen. The design is intentional. It allows for movement without exposure, for presence without constant visibility. You begin to understand that privacy here is not simply about separation from the outside world. It is about structuring relationships within the space itself. Who can see whom? Who can enter where? Who moves freely and who does not? All of this is quietly governed by the layout of the architecture. Courtyards play a central role in this design. Each one feels like a contained world, open to the sky but enclosed on all sides. They provide light and air, but also create boundaries. Within a courtyard, you are both inside and outside, connected to the natural world while remaining protected from it. The effect is subtle but profound, shaping how you experience both openness and enclosure at the same time. Windows, too, are carefully considered. Rather than large open panes, they are often covered with intricate screens or lattice work. These allow light to pass through, but limit direct visibility. You can see out, but only partially. You can feel the presence of the world beyond, without being fully exposed to it. It is a balance between connection and concealment. Even the pathways themselves contribute to this sense of privacy. They are rarely straight or direct. Instead, they curve, narrow, and shift direction, preventing long lines of sight. This means that movement is always local. You're aware of your immediate surroundings, but not of distant activity. It creates a series of intimate spaces rather than one continuous open environment. You may begin to notice how this affects your perception. There is a feeling of safety in not being constantly observed, a sense that each space belongs to itself rather than to a larger, visible whole. At the same time, there is an awareness that others may be nearby, just beyond a wall or around a corner, present but not intrusive. This architectural approach reflects a broader way of thinking. Privacy here is not isolation, it is organization. It allows multiple lives to unfold within the same structure without overlapping unnecessarily. It creates a rhythm of movement and stillness, of interaction and retreat, that defines the daily experience of those who live here. Think about that for a moment. How space itself can shape behavior, not through rules or commands, but through design. How the simple arrangement of walls and doors can guide where you go, what you see, and how you move. As you continue through this layered environment, you begin to feel how deeply the architecture influences everything around you. It is not just a backdrop for life. It is an active participant in it, quietly shaping each moment as it unfolds. You begin to sense that this is not a chaotic or indulgent place, but a highly structured society. Every individual has a role, a position, a place within a carefully balanced hierarchy, one that shapes daily life with quiet precision. At first, the structure is not immediately visible. There are no loud announcements, no obvious displays of rank. But as you observe more closely, patterns begin to emerge. Certain individuals move with a subtle authority, their presence acknowledged through small gestures. A slight pause in conversation, a shift in posture, a quiet step aside. Others move differently, more freely in some areas, more restricted in others. It is a system understood without needing to be explained. This hierarchy is not static but dynamic. It evolves over time, shaped by experience, relationships, and circumstance. Those who enter this world begin at its edges, learning its rhythms, its expectations, its unspoken rules. Gradually, through time and adaptation, they find their place within it. Advancement is possible, but it is not sudden. It unfolds slowly, through observation and alignment with the structure around them. You may begin to notice how roles are interconnected. No position exists in isolation. Each depends on the others to maintain the balance of daily life. Tasks are distributed in a way that ensures continuity, that nothing is left unattended, that the rhythm of the space remains uninterrupted. It is a system designed not for efficiency alone, but for stability. Authority here is often quiet. It does not rely on constant reinforcement, but on recognition. Those who hold influence do so through presence rather than declaration. Their decisions shape the environment in subtle ways, guiding the flow of activity without disrupting its calm. It is a form of power that feels integrated into the space itself, rather than imposed upon it. At the same time, there is an awareness of boundaries. Movement between different areas is not always unrestricted. Access is determined by role, by trust, by position within the hierarchy. This creates layers within the space, each with its own level of activity and interaction. You begin to see how the structure of the architecture and the structure of the society mirror each other, both built on careful organization and controlled access. There's also a sense of continuity that runs through this system. It has been maintained over generations, refined and adjusted, but never entirely changed. Those who live within it contribute to its ongoing existence, reinforcing its patterns through their daily actions. It is not something that needs to be enforced constantly. It is something that is lived. Think about that for a moment. How a society can function without constant noise or visible enforcement, guided instead by shared understanding and quiet consistency. How structure, when deeply embedded, becomes almost invisible, shaping behavior without drawing attention to itself. As you remain within this space, observing its subtle patterns and quiet interactions, the hierarchy becomes less of a system and more of a rhythm, a steady underlying order that supports everything around it. It is not rigid, but it is precise, not loud, but deeply present, and within it, life continues, measured, balanced, and quietly unfolding. At the center of this world stands a figure of immense influence, not loud, not visible to all, but deeply powerful. The Valid Sultan, the mother of the ruler, moves through this space with calm authority, her presence shaping decisions far beyond these walls. You begin to sense her influence before you ever see her. It exists in the way others speak, or choose not to speak, in the subtle adjustments of behavior when her presence is near. There is no need for grand announcements or visible displays of control. Authority here is quieter than that, woven into the rhythms of daily life, carried through expectation rather than command. Her position is not simply ceremonial, it is rooted in proximity to power, but also in experience. She has lived within this system longer than most, understanding its patterns, its tensions, its delicate balances. Over time, that knowledge becomes a form of control, not imposed, but exercised with careful precision. You may notice how decisions seem to ripple outward from her without direct visibility. A change in routine, a shift in responsibility, a new arrangement within the hierarchy. These adjustments appear gradually, almost naturally. But behind them, there is often a guiding presence, one that shapes outcomes without needing to be seen at every moment. The architecture itself reflects this quiet authority. Her quarters are placed at a point of central access, not fully exposed but connected. From here, movement can be observed, communication can flow, and influence can be maintained without disruption. It is a position designed not for isolation, but for awareness. There is also a sense of continuity attached to her role. While rulers may change, while political conditions shift beyond the walls, the presence of the Valide Sultan provides a form of stability. She becomes a fixed point within a system that depends on consistency, a figure who understands both the past and the present of this enclosed world. And yet, her authority is not absolute in the way one might expect. It exists within the same structured hierarchy as everything else here. It must be maintained through balance, through careful navigation of relationships, through an awareness of how influence flows between individuals. Power here is not simply held, it is managed. You may begin to notice how her presence shapes the emotional tone of the space as well. There is a certain calmness that follows her influence, a reduction of tension, a steadiness in the interactions around her. It is as though her role is not only to guide decisions, but to preserve equilibrium. Think about that for a moment. How authority can exist without constant visibility? How influence can shape a world from within, without needing to declare itself at every turn? And how, in a space defined by structure and routine, the most powerful presence may also be the quietest. As you move through this environment, her presence becomes something you feel rather than see, a steady underlying force, guiding, adjusting, maintaining, not interrupting the rhythm of daily life, but ensuring that it continues without disruption. Morning arrives gently here. Light filters through screens, servants move with practiced familiarity, and routines begin not with urgency, but with continuity. You notice how life unfolds in cycles, steady, predictable, almost meditative. The day does not begin with a sharp transition. There is no sudden shift from stillness to activity. Instead, the space awakens gradually, as if responding to the slow movement of light itself. Shadows shorten, air warms slightly, and with that, movement begins to increase. Not abruptly, but in a quiet, coordinated way. You start to notice how each part of the day carries its own tone. Morning feels soft and measured, filled with preparation and gentle activity. Tasks begin, but they do not rush forward. There is time within each action. time to move, to adjust, to complete what needs to be done without strain. As the day progresses, the rhythm becomes more defined. Responsibilities are carried out with consistency. People move along familiar paths, engaging in routines that have been repeated so often they no longer require conscious thought. There is a sense of flow, one action leading naturally into the next. Meals, conversations, moments of rest. All of these are part of the same continuous pattern. Nothing feels separate or isolated. Each activity is connected to the others, forming a cycle that repeats with subtle variations. You begin to understand that this repetition is not monotonous. It is stabilizing. There is comfort in knowing what comes next, in recognizing the structure of the day as it unfolds. It creates a sense of predictability that allows the mind to settle, to move through time without resistance. The rhythm becomes something you can follow, something that carries you rather than something you must navigate. You may also notice how time feels different within this pattern. Without sudden interruptions or sharp changes, the hours seem to blend into one another. The passage of time is marked less by events and more by shifts in light, in temperature, in subtle changes within the environment. Afternoon brings a quieter energy. Movement slows slightly, conversations become softer, and the pace of activity eases. It is not a stopping, but a gentle transition. A natural adjustment as the day begins to move toward its later hours. And then, as evening approaches, the rhythm softens further. Tasks come to a close, spaces become still again, and the cycle prepares to repeat. There is no clear ending, no defined boundary between one day and the next. Instead, there is a continuous flow, one cycle blending seamlessly into another. Think about that for a moment. How different life feels when it's guided by rhythm rather than urgency. When time is experienced as a steady current rather than a series of demands, and how, within that rhythm, even the smallest actions can take on a sense of quiet significance. As you remain within this space, the rhythm begins to feel familiar. You find yourself moving with it, adjusting to its pace, allowing it to shape your experience without effort. And in that steady repetition, there is something almost soothing, a sense that life, here, unfolds exactly as it is meant to. Contrary to myth, this is a place of learning. Languages, music, etiquette, and religious study fill the hours. You sense that knowledge is not only encouraged, but required, shaping individuals into refined members of a complex court. As you observe more closely, you begin to notice how structured this learning is. It is not casual or occasional, but woven directly into daily life. Instruction happens in designated spaces, at certain times, with a quiet consistency that mirrors the rhythm of everything else within these walls. You may hear the soft repetition of words in unfamiliar languages, phrases spoken slowly, carefully, until they settle into memory. Language becomes a tool not only for communication, but for navigation. A way of understanding the broader world beyond the harem's boundaries. Music, too, plays a role in this education. Instruments are handled with care, their sounds gentle and controlled. Practice is not loud or performative, but focused. Each note placed deliberately, each movement refined over time. The goal is not simply to produce sound, but to shape it, to understand its place within a larger harmony. There is also an emphasis on behavior, on the subtle details of interaction. Etiquette is taught not through rigid instruction, but through observation and repetition. You begin to see how posture, tone, and timing all contribute to communication. What is said matters, but how it is said matters just as much. Religious study provides another layer to this education. Quiet reflection, recitation, and contemplation become part of the daily rhythm. These moments are not separate from the rest of life. They are integrated into it, offering a sense of grounding within the structure of the day. You start to realize that this education is not aimed at a single outcome. It is not about specialization, but about balance. Each individual is shaped across multiple areas: language, art, behavior, belief, creating a form of refinement that reflects the complexity of the world they inhabit. There is also a sense of progression within this learning. Skills develop gradually, over time, through repetition and quiet correction. There is no urgency to master everything at once. Instead, knowledge accumulates slowly, becoming part of the individual rather than something separate from them. Think about that for a moment. How learning changes when it is not rushed, when it unfolds as part of daily life, rather than as something separate from it, and how, in that slower process, understanding becomes deeper, more integrated. As you remain within this space, you begin to feel how education shapes everything around you. It influences how people move, how they speak, how they interact with one another. It becomes part of the environment itself. An invisible structure supporting the visible one. And within that quiet process of learning, the individuals of this world are not only maintaining its traditions, they are continuing them, carrying them forward, one measured moment at a time. Somewhere in the distance, soft music rises, strings vibrating gently in the quiet air. It does not dominate the space, it blends into it, becoming part of the atmosphere itself, like breath or light. At first, the sound is almost difficult to locate. It does not come from a single point, but seems to drift through the corridors, carried by the air as it moves between spaces. It rises and falls gently, never overwhelming the silence, but shaping it in subtle ways. You begin to notice how music here is not meant to draw attention. It is not performed for spectacle or display. Instead, it exists alongside daily life, enhancing it without interrupting it. It becomes part of the background, a quiet presence that adds texture to the stillness. The instruments themselves produce soft, controlled tones. Strings hum lightly, each note sustained just long enough to blend into the next. There is no sharpness, no abrupt change. The sound moves smoothly, mirroring the rhythm of the space around it. You may also notice how the music interacts with the architecture. The enclosed courtyards and narrow corridors shape the way sound travels, creating echoes that are gentle rather than pronounced. The result is a layered effect. Sound reflecting softly off stone, returning in quieter forms. There are moments when the music fades completely, leaving only silence behind. And in those moments, you become more aware of how the two are connected. The absence of music does not feel empty. It feels like a continuation, as though the silence carries the memory of sound within it. This relationship between sound and stillness creates a unique atmosphere. It allows the mind to move between focus and rest, between attention and calm. The music does not demand engagement. It invites it, gently, without pressure. Think about that for a moment. How sound can exist without dominating space. How it can support silence rather than replace it. And how, in that balance, both become more noticeable, more present. As you continue to listen, the music becomes less of a separate element and more of a part of the environment. It blends with the sound of water, with the movement of air, with the quiet activity around you. It becomes something you feel as much as something you hear. And in that soft interplay between sound and stillness, the space takes on a deeper sense of calm, a quiet harmony that lingers even as the notes themselves fade away. Fabric here is more than decoration. It is language. Silks, layers, colours and textures quietly communicate status, identity, and role, each detail woven into the silent social structure that surrounds you. As you observe the people around you, you begin to notice how clothing reflects position within the hierarchy. Certain fabrics appear more frequently in specific areas, certain colours associated with particular roles. These distinctions are not announced but understood, part of the unspoken system that organises life within these walls. The materials themselves are carefully chosen. Silk catches the light softly, creating subtle movement with each step. Layers shift and settle as people move, producing faint sounds that blend into the overall quiet of the space. Nothing feels excessive or abrupt. Every element contributes to a sense of balance. You may notice how clothing also shapes movement. The way fabric falls, the way it responds to motion, influences how individuals carry themselves. Steps become measured, gestures more deliberate. The body adapts to the material, and in doing so aligns with the rhythm of the environment. There is also an element of continuity in these garments. Styles do not change rapidly, they evolve slowly, maintaining a connection to tradition while allowing for subtle variation. This creates a visual consistency throughout the space, a shared identity that reflects the structure of the society itself. At the same time, small details allow for individuality. The arrangement of layers, the choice of texture, the way fabric is worn. These variations offer a quiet form of expression within the broader system. Identity is not erased. It is refined, shaped to fit within the collective structure. You begin to understand that clothing here is not separate from daily life. It is part of it, influencing how people move, how they interact, how they are perceived. It becomes another layer of communication, one that operates without words. Think about that for a moment. How something as simple as fabric can carry meaning. How it can reflect not only personal identity, but social structure. And how, in a place defined by quiet order, even the smallest details become significant. As you continue to observe, the patterns become clearer. Clothing is not just seen, it is understood. It fits seamlessly into the rhythm of the space, contributing to the overall sense of harmony and balance. And within that quiet language of fabric and form, identity is expressed not through bold declaration, but through subtle presence, woven gently into the fabric of daily life. Moving quietly through corridors, the eunuchs serve as both guardians and administrators. Their presence is calm, controlled, and essential, bridging the boundary between the inner world of the harem and the outer machinery of the empire. At first, their presence may seem almost invisible. They do not draw attention to themselves, nor do they interrupt the rhythm of the space. And yet, as you begin to observe more closely, you realize how central they are to everything that happens here. They are the ones who move between worlds, carrying messages, maintaining order, ensuring that the delicate balance of this enclosed society remains intact. Their role is shaped by trust, but also by responsibility. Unlike others within the harem, they have controlled access to both the inner and outer sections of the palace. This makes them essential intermediaries, the quiet channels through which communication flows. Messages that cannot be spoken openly are carried by them, moving through corridors with a sense of purpose that never disturbs the surrounding calm. You may notice how their movements are deliberate, almost measured. There is no hesitation, no unnecessary motion. Each step seems guided by familiarity with the space, an understanding of its structure so complete that navigation requires no thought. They know which paths to take, which doors to approach, which spaces require silence, and which allow for quiet interaction. Their presence also carries a sense of order, not enforced through visible authority, but through consistency. They maintain routines, oversee transitions, and ensure that the daily flow of life continues without interruption. In many ways, they are the unseen framework that supports the visible world of the harem. There is also a layer of discipline in their role. They operate within strict expectations, balancing loyalty to the inner household with obligations to the broader palace system. This requires a careful awareness of boundaries, knowing when to act, when to observe, and when to remain entirely still. You begin to understand that their importance lies not in prominence, but in reliability. They are trusted because they are consistent, because they move within the structure without disrupting it. Their presence is steady, almost constant, yet never intrusive. Think about that for a moment. How a system depends not only on visible roles, but on those who operate quietly within it. How the smooth functioning of a complex world often rests on individuals who remain just beyond the center of attention. As you continue to move through the corridors, their presence becomes more familiar. You notice them in passing, in the background, at the edges of interaction. Always present, always aware, always maintaining the subtle connections that keep this world in motion. Time here feels different. Without the noise of markets or battlefields, hours stretch and soften. You begin to notice how life is measured not in deadlines, but in routines, rituals, and the slow passage of light across stone. At first, this shift may feel unfamiliar. You're used to time marked by urgency, by schedules, by sudden changes, by the constant movement from one task to another. But here, those markers fade. In their place, a different sense of time emerges, one that is less about progression and more about presence. You begin to notice how moments expand. Without interruption, each action takes on a fuller shape. A step across a courtyard, the pouring of water, the quiet exchange of words. All of it feels slightly extended, as though time itself has slowed to accommodate the rhythm of the space. Light becomes one of the primary markers of time. As the sun moves, it changes the character of each room. Morning light feels soft and angled, casting long shadows across the floor. Midday brings a steadier brightness, while evening softens everything again, returning the space to a more muted tone. There is no need to measure time precisely. The day unfolds in a sequence that is understood rather than tracked. You begin to anticipate transitions, not because of a clock, but because of subtle shifts in the environment. The way the air feels, the way shadows move, the way activity rises and falls. This creates a sense of continuity that feels almost seamless. There are no sharp edges between one moment and the next. Instead, time flows gently, like water moving through a quiet channel, steady, unbroken, always in motion but never rushed. You may also begin to feel how this affects your own awareness. Without urgency, your attention settles more easily. You notice details that might otherwise pass unnoticed. The texture of surfaces, the quiet presence of others, the subtle changes in sound and light. Think about that for a moment. How different time feels when it is not something to keep up with, but something to move within. When it becomes less about reaching the next moment, and more about experiencing the current one. As you remain in this space, the sense of time without urgency becomes more natural. You begin to align with it, to move within its rhythm without resistance. And in that alignment there is a quiet sense of calm, a feeling that nothing needs to be hurried, that everything unfolds exactly as it should. Through carved lattice screens, glimpses of the outside world appear. Fragmented, softened, distant. You sense both connection and separation. A reminder that beyond these walls the Empire continues to move. As you approach one of these windows, the light shifts. It becomes more direct, more open, yet still filtered through the intricate patterns of the screen. The outside world is visible, but never fully revealed. Shapes move beyond the lattice. Colours shift, but details remain just out of reach. This partial visibility creates a unique sensation. You're aware of the world beyond, but not immersed in it. It feels close, yet distant. Present, yet separate. The screen becomes a boundary not only of space, but of experience. You may notice how the patterns of the lattice shape what you see. Lines intersect, curves overlap, creating a layered view that changes as you move. It is not a fixed image, but a shifting one, dependent on perspective, on light, on movement. This design serves multiple purposes. It allows light and air to enter, maintaining a connection to the environment outside. But it also preserves privacy, ensuring that what happens within remains unseen from the outside. It is a balance between openness and protection. There is also a symbolic quality to these windows. They represent a threshold, a point where two worlds meet without merging. On one side, the structured, enclosed life of the harem. On the other, the dynamic, unpredictable movement of the empire. You begin to realize how this limited view shapes perception. Without full access to the outside, understanding comes in fragments. Small pieces of information that must be interpreted and imagined. It creates a different relationship with the world beyond, one that is indirect, yet still meaningful. Think about that for a moment. How seeing only part of something changes the way you understand it. How distance and limitation can shape perception just as much as direct experience. As you step back from the window, the outside world fades again, becoming less immediate. The interior space reasserts itself, with its controlled light, its quiet rhythms, its contained environment. And yet, the awareness remains. That beyond these walls another world continues to unfold just out of full view. Life here is not defined only by structure, but by emotion. Quiet friendships form, rivalries emerge, and moments of loneliness drift through the stillness. It is a human world, layered and complex. As you spend more time within these walls, you begin to notice the subtle currents of emotion that move beneath the surface. They are not expressed loudly or dramatically, but they are present, shaping interactions, influencing behavior, adding depth to the quiet routines of daily life. Friendships develop slowly, often through shared experiences and repeated proximity. A glance, a brief conversation, a moment of mutual understanding. These small interactions build connections over time. They're not always spoken openly, but they are felt. A quiet sense of companionship within the structured environment. At the same time, differences emerge. Not every relationship is harmonious. Rivalries can form, sometimes subtle, sometimes more pronounced. These tensions are rarely expressed directly, but they influence the atmosphere in quiet ways. A shift in tone, a change in behavior, a moment of hesitation. There are also moments of solitude. Even within a shared space, individuals experience periods of quiet isolation, times when the presence of others does not fully reach them. These moments are not constant, but they are part of the emotional landscape, adding depth to the experience of life within these walls. You begin to understand that this emotional complexity exists alongside the structured hierarchy. It is not separate from it, but intertwined with it. Roles and positions influence relationships, but they do not define them entirely. There is always a human element, unpredictable, evolving, present in every interaction. Think about that for a moment. How even in the most structured environments, emotion continues to shape experience. How human connection and tension exist regardless of the systems that surround them. As you continue to observe, the emotional landscape becomes more visible, not through dramatic displays, but through subtle shifts, small changes that reveal the depth of human experience within this quiet world. You begin to understand that influence does not always require presence. Decisions shaped here ripple outward, affecting politics, alliances, and the future of the empire, all from within these hidden spaces. At first, this idea may feel distant. The space around you seems calm, removed from the intensity of political life. But as you observe more closely, you begin to sense how connections extend beyond these walls. Conversations held here, relationships formed here, decisions made quietly. All of these contribute to outcomes that reach far beyond the harem itself. Power here is indirect, but not insignificant. It operates through influence rather than command, through guidance rather than declaration. Those who hold it understand how to shape outcomes without needing to appear at the center of events. You may notice how information flows into and out of this space. Messages arrive, are considered, and then passed along. Altered, interpreted, influenced by those who receive them. The process is subtle, but its effects can be far-reaching. This creates a form of power that is difficult to see, but easy to feel once you become aware of it. It does not rely on visibility or recognition. Instead, it exists within the connections between people, within the decisions that shape the direction of events. Think about that for a moment. How influence can exist without being openly acknowledged. How power can operate quietly, shaping outcomes from behind the scenes. As you remain within this space, the idea becomes clearer. This is not a place removed from the workings of the empire. It is a part of them, connected in ways that are not immediately visible. And within that quiet connection, decisions are made, paths are shaped, and the course of history continues, often without ever revealing where it truly began. Water plays a central role in baths, in fountains, in quiet rituals of care. The sound of flowing water fills the background, creating a sense of renewal that touches every part of daily life. As you move deeper into this world, you begin to notice how consistently water appears. It is never absent for long. In courtyards, it gathers in shallow basins. Along walls, it flows gently through narrow channels. In private chambers, it becomes part of daily routines. Poured, warmed, used with intention. It is not only practical, it is atmospheric. The presence of water changes how the space feels. The air is slightly cooler near it, softer, more breathable. Its movement adds a subtle rhythm, a quiet continuity that runs beneath everything else. Unlike voices or footsteps, the sound of water does not demand attention. It simply exists, steady, predictable, calming. You may find yourself drawn toward one of the bathing areas, where the rituals of cleanliness take place. These spaces are enclosed, warm, filled with soft echoes and diffused light. Steam rises gently, blurring the edges of the room, creating a sense of separation from the outside world. Here, time feels even slower, more contained. The process itself is unhurried. Water is poured, hands move with familiarity, each action flowing into the next. There is no rush to complete the ritual. Instead, it unfolds as a sequence of careful, repeated gestures, cleansing not only the body but the mind as well. You begin to understand that cleanliness here is not simply about hygiene, it is about restoration, about returning to a state of balance. The repetition of these rituals creates a sense of grounding, a moment within the day where everything else pauses, even if only briefly. There is also a communal aspect to these practices. While some rituals are private, others are shared within designated spaces, creating quiet moments of connection. Conversations, if they occur, are soft, measured, blending into the surrounding atmosphere rather than standing apart from it. You may notice how the architecture supports this experience. Surfaces are smooth, designed to interact with water, to reflect light in softened ways. The enclosed nature of the space allows warmth to linger, creating a consistent environment that feels separate from the cooler corridors beyond. Think about that for a moment. How something as simple as water can shape an entire atmosphere. How its presence can influence not only the physical environment, but the emotional tone of a place. As you step away, the sound of water follows you for a moment, then fades into the background once more. But its effect lingers. A subtle sense of calm, of renewal, of continuity that carries through the rest of the space. Meals arrive not as grand spectacles, but as consistent, carefully prepared moments of nourishment. The scents of spices drift gently through the air, subtle reminders of the empire's vast reach. As you become aware of the preparation of food, you notice how it fits seamlessly into the rhythm of the day. There is no sudden interruption, no loud announcement. Instead, meals appear almost naturally, introduced into the flow of daily life without disrupting it. The scents reach you first, warm, layered, familiar yet complex. Spices carried from distant regions of the empire find their way into these dishes, their presence subtle but unmistakable. You begin to sense how even within this enclosed space the wider world leaves its imprint. Food here is not excessive. It is measured, balanced, prepared with care rather than display. Portions are thoughtful, arranged with attention to detail. Each element serves a purpose, contributing to a sense of completeness rather than abundance. You may observe how meals are experienced. They are not rushed. There is time to sit, to eat slowly, to allow each moment to unfold without pressure. Conversation, if present, remains quiet, secondary to the act itself. Eating becomes a pause within the day, a moment of stillness rather than activity. There is also a rhythm to when food appears. Certain times are expected, anticipated without needing to be marked. The body begins to align with this pattern, recognizing the cycle of nourishment as part of the larger structure of daily life. You begin to understand that food is not only sustenance, it is continuity. It connects one moment to the next, one day to another. The repetition of meals, the familiarity of taste, the consistency of preparation. All of it contributes to the sense of stability within the space. At the same time, there is subtle variation, different ingredients, slight changes in flavor, small adjustments that prevent monotony without disrupting the overall pattern. It is a balance between sameness and difference, between predictability and quiet discovery. Think about that for a moment. How routine can be comforting rather than restrictive. How the repetition of simple acts can create a sense of grounding, of belonging within a particular place. As you finish observing, the scents begin to fade, replaced once again by the quieter atmosphere of the surrounding corridors, but the memory remains. A reminder that even within these walls the world beyond continues to influence what is experienced here. Even in seclusion, information flows. Messages pass through trusted hands. whispers move along corridors, and the world beyond the walls finds its way inside in quiet, controlled ways. At first, it may seem as though this space is entirely separate from the outside world. The walls are thick, the pathways controlled, the atmosphere contained. But as you remain here longer, you begin to notice subtle signs of connection. Moments where the outside world touches the inside, even if only briefly. Information does not arrive loudly, it is carried, passed from one individual to another, often through those who move between spaces. The process is quiet, deliberate, shaped by trust. Not every message reaches every ear. Instead, information follows specific paths, guided by the structure of the hierarchy. You may observe how conversation shifts slightly when new information arrives. A change in tone, a moment of quiet attention, a subtle adjustment in behavior. These reactions are often small, almost imperceptible, but they reveal the presence of something beyond the immediate environment. There is also a rhythm to this flow. Information does not come constantly. It arrives in intervals, creating moments of awareness that rise and then settle. Between these moments, life continues as before, steady, uninterrupted. You begin to understand that control over information is part of the structure itself. What is shared, when it is shared, and with whom. All of these decisions shape how the space responds to the outside world. It is not a passive system, but an active one, filtering, interpreting, managing what enters and what remains outside. Think about that for a moment. How information changes a space without altering its physical form. How knowledge, even when quietly delivered, can shift perception, influence decisions, and shape the flow of daily life. As you continue to observe, the movement of information becomes more apparent, not as a constant stream, but as a series of quiet exchanges, each one carrying a small piece of the world beyond these walls. And within that controlled flow, the harem remains connected, not fully exposed, not entirely isolated, but balanced somewhere in between, where knowledge arrives softly and its presence is felt more than it is seen. And now, as this quiet world begins to fade, you may notice how different it feels from the stories you once imagined. Not a place of constant spectacle, but a space of rhythm, of structure, of lives unfolding slowly behind carefully shaped walls. A world where power moved quietly, where time softened, where light, sound, and routine shaped each passing moment more than anything sudden or dramatic ever could. When you step back from it, you begin to see something deeper, not just a hidden part of an empire, but a reflection of how humans adapt to space, to structure, to limitation, and still create meaning within it. Because even here, within walls designed for separation, there was learning, connection, stillness, and change. Lives were lived in full, even if history only chose to remember fragments. And perhaps that is something worth holding on to, that behind every simplified story. There is always a quieter truth, waiting patiently beneath it, a truth made not of grand events, but of ordinary moments, repeated gently over time. So as you settle back into your own space, you might notice how different your world feels now. The openness, the movement, the quiet freedoms you carry without thinking, the ability to step outside, to choose direction, to move through space without walls guiding every path. And for a moment, you might feel a quiet sense of gratitude for that. Not loud, not overwhelming, just a soft awareness, like the fading echo of water in a distant courtyard. Take a slow breath in, and let it fall away again. Feel your body resting where it is, supported, still. The past has a way of reminding us, not only of what once was, but of what is. And as this story gently dissolves into the background of your thoughts, you can allow that awareness to drift with it. No need to hold on to every detail. No need to follow every thread. Just let it settle, the way light fades at the end of the day, gradually, quietly, without effort. You are here, in your own moment in time, part of a world that continues to move, to change, to unfold, and somewhere within that, there is space for rest. So let the corridors grow distant, let the walls soften, let the quiet rhythm of that hidden world dissolve into stillness, and as everything becomes a little quieter, a little softer, you can simply drift and rest